The opinions and statements made by the guests of the Success in Practice podcast are their own, and I do not endorse or accept responsibility for their positions. Any information given by myself or the guests is educational in intention and not to be taken as medical advice. If you choose to act on the content involved in the podcast, you do so at your own risk. Hello everyone, welcome to the Success in Practice podcast. Today is actually a bit more of a special episode. Upon speaking to Anne's joining me today, and upon speaking to Anne, she said that it would be a good idea that she interview me, and so I happily obliged. And so today, Anne will be taking over the podcast and she'll be asking the questions. So, Anne, handing it over to you. Welcome.
Thanks, Sami, and hello, everyone. Yep, this is our Sami Karam. He owns and operates a sports medicine clinic in Parramatta and in Peakhurst. He's been practicing since 2003. He graduated from the University of Western Sydney's amazing osteopathy program. On graduation, he worked with John Abdullah and me. I was lucky enough for that. In 2005, he started the Parramatta Sports Medicine Clinic and then later acquired John's practice in 2005. He was born in Beirut, Lebanon in 1987 and he lived in Western Sydney. He's married with 3 kids. A 4th is on the way and he continues to be primarily a clinician, helping patients as an effective generalist, which I love, and with a keen interest in athletic development, which I'm less keen on. He thought it best to turn the tables on himself today and have him answer questions about his views on osteopathy. So I think the first question is the one that I'm always interested in, Sami, is what got you into that class on day one? Because I remember you on day one.
Look, it's always a bit of serendipity, I guess. I knew nothing about osteopathy, and I was a kid out at Western Sydney in a public high school. And my careers advisor said, there's a new physiotherapy course over at UWS, and I put a girl into it last year, and she loved it, and so I'm gonna put you into it. So I'm waiting on a acceptance into physiotherapy. And I mean, I was a kid that didn't know much, and I was good with the body. I remember being 16 and running the sidelines at a football tournament, a soccer tournament over here in Sydney, and I'd kind of get the players ready and stretch them up and do all that stuff. So I enjoyed that. And when January came around, I hadn't received any formal kind of letters saying that you've been accepted, and I'd gotten the marks that I needed to get. I'd actually gotten early acceptance through a regional entrance exam, which is more like an IQ test, and that gave me like an extra, I think, 12 points onto my HSC, and that got me in. But nonetheless, I didn't get the letter that I was after, and took all my letters down to the careers advisor and said, "Oh, this is it. It's osteopathy. This is the one." And I was, imagine a kid, kind of, my parents are waiting for this great news, that I'm doing something like that. And I said, "No, this is what I'm doing." So I thought, well, I'll go down to the open day and see what it's like. And I went there, and there you were, having a chat. And everybody seemed like they were asking very intelligent questions, and I didn't really have much to say. So I put my hand up and asked you how much money I could make out of osteopathy. Could I earn a decent living? That was the only question I asked. And you actually said that's the first sane question that all of you people who know nothing about osteopathy have asked all afternoon. And so that gave me a sigh of relief. Look, I thought I'd try it out for 6 months, see if I liked it, and I was hooked after day one. So, that was it. Just straight away. I mean, I think the first memory of it was you and Peter Edwards and all of us in our undies kind of having a look at each other doing a 10-step screening process, the Greenman 10-step screening protocol. And then that was, I was hooked.
Yes, that was fraught because we had Muslim people there. Everyone was young. We didn't quite know the rules. We were given virtually no guidance by the university. What? How did you go at UWS?
Look, the first, I have to say, the first year was hard. It was difficult, and I remember in our final year, in fifth year, having a chat to Mark Cooper, and we had a couple of drinks, and he said to me, "Look, I've got to tell you a
No
story."
relation. He was in your year, wasn't he?
Yes, Mark was in my year, and Mark said to me, "Look, I want to tell you a story. We actually all got together in that first semester in first year, and we're at the pub, and you weren't there. And we all took a vote, and we all voted you to be the first one to either get kicked out or fail in the first semester of first year." Now, I didn't know that until after I graduated, but that's how I felt. I felt like I was just hanging on the edge because I didn't know a lot. I mean, I struggled, and I guess I have to thank you for that because you kind of helped me a lot, and not that you did me any favors, but you knew that I had the information in me, and you dragged it out where you didn't have to. You could have just let me follow my own
Oh, you
sword.
were always a standout. You were always a standout. Tell us about practice. You graduated after 5 years, and tell us about your practice.
Well, first couple of years of practice, like I said, was well, like you mentioned, was with yourself and John. And I'd been working as a student with John in his practice, where we did a lot of the myofascial soft tissue kind of work. But John was great because John would just say, "Look, just do everything except manipulate. You can go for your life. Do whatever you want. You want to articulate. You want to." He really encouraged me to think about the body in a more of a pattern recognition type of way. So, he'd encourage us to look at certain patterns and strain patterns and try to unwind them and try to be a bit more specific with what we're doing rather than just straight out massage. So that, and going back to the previous question, I really struggled the first year, but when I started working with John, my learning curve went through the roof, and I felt like it was easy after that. And I learned very early on at university was that my education happened at John's clinic, not at university. And so that was my primary focus, was to really pay attention to what I was doing there with John and make sure I got the marks to get through at university. The clinical stuff at university was very easy for me. I didn't really have too much trouble with it just because I hit the ground running with John. And then when I came out to work, initially with John, it was very seamless. It integrated really well. And then when you called me, I think uh, your business partner at the time, Paul, wasn't well and had to take some time off. And you said, "Can you come and fill in the gap there?" And that was a good experience to kind of treat the patients that he had been treating because he was a fairly astute manipulator, and that really sharpened up my skills. So I enjoyed those first couple of years. Geez, I made a lot of money. Like you look back on it then, and you do really well. Like we did very well in terms of finances, and it was enjoyable because you got to practice osteopathy, like real osteopathy. Just where patients just relied on your knowledge of osteopathy and how you were able to unwind fascia and tissue and help them kind of get out of their problems. So the first 2 years for me were fantastic. I couldn't really wish for another, like a better time. And I guess I would say the first 2 years are very important to young practitioners because if you get it right in the first 2 years, oh geez, you just go leaps and bounds after that. But if you don't get it right in the first couple of years, it's not like you're going to fail or you're going to, but usually you stagnate. You just kind of stay at the same level. And
Well, it's like child psychology, isn't it? If you're damaged in the first few years, and that stays with you for your whole life. And I think you've got to remember. You said you made a lot of money in those first years, and you did. I remember that. But that gave me a lot of pleasure too. Because it's not like I wasn't making any money out of your labour, but you were making more. And it's always been a big thing for me that the person whose body's on the bench, the one who's doing the work, should make more money than the person who's running the show. But I think it's just like imprinting of ducklings and stuff like that. You get it right for those first 2 years, and it doesn't. Well, what do you think it would have been like if you had have just gone out to Western Sydney and put your shingle up and started without a John and without an Anne or a Paul? How would your practice have evolved? I mean, not your business. I mean, your osteopathic practice.
Well, I mean, if I hadn't received osteopathy with a capital O, I guess, if I hadn't received that kind of philosophy, the principles, and really seen it work in practice. So if I hadn't had that example, I'd be kind of shooting ducks blind. And I guess what I probably would have ended up doing was maybe some combination of uh, physiotherapy, manipulation, and rehab, and that's what's happening. I guess if you look out there, what's the information that's out there? That's what you're going to find. It's a bit of physio, bit of massage, a bit of manipulation, and nothing too specific, and some rehab. And I guess it would be more like chaotic rather than structured. Um, look? I'm a hard worker, so and even through university, when I did struggle, I never really thought about failure as being an option, and so I would have gotten through. Whether I would have been happy or where I am now, that's another story. I might have been in another place, but I would have made it through just because that's my personality. I don't accept the premise that I'm going to give it up and go do something else. But I mean, maybe, who knows? I mean, it'll beat you down, and I guess I can't say that that may not have happened to me, but it's doubtful. It's just not in my nature.
Has it been a pleasure?
It's been a big pleasure. It's been a privilege. Like I always say it to the people that work with me now. Like it's just a real privilege to be able to practice this every single day. It's something that it's like you found a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, and then you can't believe that other people don't know about it. And then you kind of go and you want to share this pot of gold, and you kind of give the gold away, and then more gold comes up. Yeah, that's what it feels like when you practice. And every time a patient walks through your door, it's like that.
And isn't it delightful when you have a new graduate working with you and something clicks and something tips over and you see that they've actually come into this magical realm of osteopathic medicine as opposed to exercise physiology and massage and
I had it happen today with one of the chiropractic students that works with me, and I was showing her. There was a patient in front of me that had a little, well, not a little, but a decent short leg on that right side, and they were just compressed down all through the right side. The hip joint was kind of compressed in. They were caved over, right side bending through the lumbars, a rotation through the lumbars to the right side, classic like type 2 type stuff. And I said to her, I said, look, you've got to treat it from the bottom up. You've got to treat the lumbars, but you got to address that short leg, and then just move things out of the way and let the body heal. Like and I gave the example of some of the chiros that use wedges. I said that's not like that's a bit antithetical. We're not trying to go against what the body wants to do. We're trying to just move things out of the way and let the body do the rest. And it kind of clicked in her head. A light bulb went off, and she saw it, and she's like, okay. So that happened today, actually. Funny that you mentioned that. It's amazing to see.
I remember once you saying to me, and it's interesting, you always learn from the people around you. It doesn't matter what year they're in or how many years they've been out. I think you called me, you said you'd seen someone who had been diagnosed with high intraocular pressure.
Oh,
and
yes.
you remember this?
Yeah, I remember that.
You had treated him or her, whatever it was, for a sore neck, and he or she had the surgery on one side, so pressure. I don't know if it was reduced. I don't know if it was successful pressure. But then they were going to do the next one a week or two later, and when they got to it and they measured it, it was completely normal.
Yeah,
And I
remember that.
And why wouldn't osteopathy help?
Yeah,
that? I mean, it's a pressure.
Yeah, I actually remember the measurements. That was like a 12. I don't know what 12 means, but both eyes were at a 12, and he had the first eye done, and they wouldn't do both eyes in case something happened. He went blind, and the only intervention that happened between the first surgery and the supposedly second surgery was my intervention, and then they retested it. It was like down to 2.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we don't. They couldn't explain it, and then said, well, we're not doing the surgery. So yeah, I remember that. That was like in the first couple of years of practice too.
Yeah. I mean, I've had that happen with women who have they've been having a pap smear and they can't find the cervix, and inadvertently or accidentally come to see an osteopath, in this case me, massive torsion through the pelvis, you fix it up, they go back, they were seeing the specialist this time to get the pap smear, and there it was right in front of them, and the young doctor got in big trouble because it was there, and but we know what it was. Sammy, what were some of the big turning points in your career? I guess it was, first of all, besides working for John and with me, working with John and with me,
Yeah.
it would have been setting up your own business in Parramatta.
Yeah, setting up at Parramatta was a big kind of learning curve. Obviously, not just practicing, but then being in charge of the business side of things. I mean, back then it was a different game. That we were still writing checks, I think, to paying bills and doing that kind of stuff. So the internet was still quite young, and so that was a turning point. Look, in terms of practice, in terms of clinical practice, a big turning point for me was when I actually acquired John's practice in 2012.
Yeah.
I built Parramatta up to about 100 a week. I was doing about 100 a week,
Were you
and John
alone
was
there?
doing. Sorry,
Were you alone there doing the 100?
I was alone, but I had assistants.
Yeah.
So I was alone. I had two little rooms in a kind of like a on top of some commercial shop fronts, and so it wasn't a great looking clinic, but it did the job.
That was
Cost
in
me $200 a week in rent. So
shock, shocking. Yeah.
yeah. So keep your overheads low, and just get patients in, do good work, and they were referring more patients. It's great to have a network. Like, I grew up in Western Sydney. My background, I was born in Beirut, Lebanon, like you said, and we've got a large community as well. So they back you and they help you out, and they spread the word, and you kind of take off. And I guess, but the biggest, I think, a big turning point was when I acquired John's practice, and I went from having to treat 100 a week to around 250 a week with assistants, and then I had to take on associates and palm off. But the most I could palm off was about 50 a week to the associates. But that really required that I go back and think about what I was doing, because I had to become very efficient at what I do and make sure that I was, not just going through the motions. Like, you constantly have to think about it until you get better. And then you think a little bit deeper, and then you get better, and then it becomes more natural. But then you take it that next step further, and then it gets better. And then hopefully it's just like playing the guitar, and you kind of play it really well. It's not hard anymore. It's enjoyable. And you roll with the punches, I guess. Like, I'm sure I haven't been able to help everybody, but most people, and that's something.
It's funny you should say that, because I saw an interview with Eric Clapton once, years and years ago, and it was they asked him what it's like being the best guitarist in the world. Now, that's disputable, but anyway, he just dropped his head and he said, "Listen, mate, you just put a guitar in my hand, I don't even think about it anymore. It's past even being a skill." And I think that's what happens. You're doing things and you're not even thinking about it. You're still doing it well, but he can play the same songs over and over and over again. And maybe, like us, you're doing the same techniques for a different tune, whatever it may be. But sometimes we do have to think. And I don't think Eric Clapton has to think that much about playing E, A, and B7. I think, he'll be demented and be able to play guitar. We won't be demented and able to be osteopaths.
Yeah.
We need more than that, because there is medicine behind us.
Yes, there is. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, you get good at it, but you have to think first, and you've got to make sure that your thoughts have to hold up to the criticism of your own. Like, you want ideas to die in your head before they die on the patient. That's, you want them to, if you have a bad idea, it's better that you think through it and let it die in your head before you act it out on a patient and have something not work out.
Have you ever
And
injured someone?
hello, everyone. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for watching and listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel on whichever platform that you are listening on. If any of the conversations have resonated with you and you feel that I can help elevate your practice, you can find me at successinpractice.net. That is, the Success in Practice program can be found at successinpractice.net. The Success in Practice program is the signature program that takes a practitioner who may be struggling with retaining patients, They may not be certain about building effective treatment strategies, and they may feel somewhat anxious and doubtful about what they are going to do with a patient. And they are not really accelerating in the real world of private practice. It takes this practitioner and it turns their careers right around to the point where the patients have an effective diagnosis and a real treatment plan that they can take home. Patients are happy to book in multiple sessions with you, and they are confident about your abilities. And more importantly, you now have direction and are confident about your own abilities. The program streamlines how you operate as a practitioner. Guys, you should have been taught this at university, but you weren't. You may have been practicing for the last few years thinking there has to be a better way. There has to be a more effective way of engaging with patients and getting them results. Well, there is. And this is what the program delivers. Go to successinpractice.net and check out the options available to you. See where I can help you easily grow your patient list and finally earn the rewarding income that you deserve. For all the information on how you can reach me personally, check out the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to the chat transcripts from these podcasts. These are valuable and a wealth of information. I really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Guys, leave a comment if there's any questions on this episode. And please, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the show. No, I haven't injured someone. I've applied too much stress where they've been very sore. I had a patient. You get the disc aggravation stuff. Where you treat them and their discs kind of aggravate. You get that stuff. Early on, I had a progressive disc issue where the patients just got worse and worse every time I treated them, and I was freaking out. And it was actually John that helped me on that, because he said, they're gonna get worse before they get better. So just ride it out and keep doing what you're doing, and make sure that you keep your techniques really sharp. And eventually they got better, but that was scary. People just getting worse every time they see you.
But they still came back.
Yeah, they still came back. A lot of it has to do with how you engage with them as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Course. Yeah. So you had those rooms. I think it was in Church Street, Parramatta. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Remember that. And now you've moved to rooms that you bought yourself.
No, so then we moved to a like a cottage that was owned by the Parramatta Leagues Club. That was like a commercial space, and that was there from 2009 till last year.
Yeah.
And we really built Parramatta up at that venue. But we got to a point where I got sick of paying rent, and then we purchased the property in Parramatta 2 years ago, renovated it, and now we're there, and that's probably where I'll retire. Yeah, but it's just like it's just been a privilege. Like it makes me happy just being at work. And the good thing about it now too is, like I mentioned to you on another episode, my wife's a podiatrist and she gets to spend Tuesday mornings with me, so we bounce things off each other, and that's enjoyable as well.
Yeah. Is money your driver?
No, well, look, I'd be lying to say, if you told me that, would you work for free? I would do it for free, in the sense that, if there was something that was sustaining me on the other end. But the main driver, money is a driver. It has to be. You've got to be rewarded for what you do. But I think the main thing for me is legacy. I'm really into legacy. I want to make sure we leave something behind that other people can kind of build on. That's the main thing. Money just comes from being good at what you do.
And it's a good measure, isn't it? It's a good measure of your success. It's what you get for successful treatments and referrals.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's lovely. I mean, who'd have thought? Who'd have thought you could do a job like this and make a lot of money?
Yeah, you can be comfortable living off osteopathy. I mean, you're not going to be I've always said to me, you're not going to be like you're limited by time, right? There's only so many patients you can see in a day before your body breaks down too. So you don't want that. And so you're limited by time. And I guess what you should use osteopathy for, if you want to make a lot of money, is good cash flow, and then just go and invest in property. That's what I tell the people that work for me. Use it. Now, banks love us, especially like through COVID. That was banks were kind of handing out money to us. So we just got to get our act together there a little bit and just start paying taxes and showing that we're earning money rather than trying to hide it under the bed.
Well, taxes are, emblematic of a civilized nation. You're from the Lebanon, where there is no government and probably no
Yeah.
taxes, and it's all in disarray.
Yeah, look, I'd love to pay less taxes. Don't get me wrong. I think we're a little bit overtaxed, but that's another conversation. But yeah, no, we do need to pay taxes just to show that you're actually making money. I mean, you can't just hide everything.
Mm.
Yeah.
Listen, what do you, the new graduates that are coming out now? I mean, I've had 50 or 60. I can't remember how many I've had over the years working with me, and I
You've
think
had more than
there's
that.
a loss. I think there's a loss of spirit in new graduates now, and they come to us, deflated and frightened. Seem to think everyone's got cancer, or about to pop a vessel in their heart or their brain or something. What do you think's going on there?
Look, I've had recent conversations. What I'm trying to do at the moment is I'm trying to get some very recent graduates onto the podcast that have been to either Victoria University, RMIT, or SCU, and just to talk to us about their experience and what they thought about their education. So I'm kind of doing that as some research for this podcast, and hopefully have those guests on in the coming weeks. And so I've been in conversations with them, and oh, geez, I tell them that they haven't been taught osteopathy. Like, I can't believe they don't have a passion for it. A lot of them have actually said that, like, we crave to go out there and see people actually do well in osteopathy, and have that actually be something that drives us. And it just wasn't given to them. They don't learn about principles. One of the VU graduates that I spoke to, who didn't really want to be out there and known. He's moved away from private practice, and he just said that I don't understand the principles. I just can't apply. Like, I feel like I've just got a whole bunch of puzzle pieces in front of me. I don't know how to put the puzzle together.
Right.
And I guess that's a bit emblematic of what we're seeing. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to investigate at the moment, and hopefully put that out there. And I hope people listen. I just hope that the people that are in charge listen, and if they can do something about it, to do something about it. And if they can't do something about it, at least own up to it and say, look, this is the way that university programs are headed. There's not much we can do. Either we kind of roll with the punches, or we lose our accreditation. And so if that's the case, then at least as a profession, we can move forward and find out maybe other avenues of helping these students at least learn about osteopathy.
I think that if when they start, and I've had a few start in the last couple of years, because after COVID we lost a few people, which I wasn't unhappy about, because the COVID really brought out anti-vaccination stuff, which, whether I agree with it or not, was so dangerous to the practice and to us continuing to be able to keep our doors open during COVID. But these young ones have started, and they weren't much chop at the start, but they had pride, and they were, I think, a bit embarrassed, and that made them even more determined to be good at this job. And we work in a practice with, I think there's 8 or 9 osteopaths, I can't remember, and I can't be bothered counting, but everyone works together to share information. That's so important. And one of the things I've found that's really important, I think I might have said it last time, is to try and get people who play team sports, because basically it is a team that you're doing, and you've got to share information. You've got to share the wins, and you've got to share the losses. But they are smart. They wouldn't be smart if they got through the course, and so they do want to know. And then
they do. I know you mentioned that about team sport. It just depends on the team that you're at too. I mean, your team, Anne, is team osteopathy. You that's what you practice, and that's what you encourage. And I know from first hand that if you see something that, I guess, isn't osteopathy, you call it out. You're not scared of calling it out. And the problem is that if you're on another team that's team, I don't know, multidisciplinary, and you've got a whole bunch of physios and EPs and OTs talking in your ear, and maybe one osteopath that's only working 2.5 days a week and may not be there whilst you're there, that's a different team that you're going to play on. So I guess I guess what I'm saying is that if you are an osteopath and you run a large clinic, hopefully you're encouraging osteopathy. Like I think to be sitting on the fence on all this stuff is not helping new graduates if you're taking them on. So
I think it's important to say that it's you're not being evangelistic here. I know that, Sammy. You're saying we want you to practice osteopathy because it works
because it
best.
works, yeah, yeah,
And most of the patients are here because they've tried everything else. Um, Having said that, apparently that's what physios say, but they have tried everything else, and whether it's period pain or headaches or mastitis or constipation or sore knee or whatever it may be, aching feet at night, restless leg, osteopathy does have a explanation for those kind of phenomena. It may not always be right, but we do have that. I don't think that the others have that an explanation that's as coherent rather, as what we've got to say. So I'm just at pains to say that this isn't being evangelistic. This is
no,
just
yeah, it
work.
isn't being evangelistic, but I guess you got to you need a point of difference too. Like okay, so I'm not right all the time. I get it, and I have my thoughts about on how the body works, and it's very similar to what you think, and very similar to what John thinks, and very similar to what a lot of the, I guess, the lineage of that, the American thought, I guess, the Ivan Lullemans and Peter Cashes and Steve Porters, down those lines, and we may not always be right, but at least we're different. Like there's something different here. And so if you're a new graduate and you're working like a physio, like a EP, what's your point of difference?
That's right. Why would you go? Why would patients
Yeah,
come?
like why would patients come and see you? Just
Yeah.
because you're called an osteopath doesn't mean you are an osteopath. And I guess this is what I say too, that AT Still, as he was ahead of his time in terms of what he knew was coming down the road. I mean, he was an MD, and he knew that one day we'd have to face up to this, and that's why the fourth principle is osteopaths practice using the above three principles. Like, it sounds bloody obvious, but that's there to make sure that you're following principles to be called an osteopath. The registration paper on your wall doesn't mean diddly squat if you're not following those first three principles. You know?
Sammy, I saw in the email that came out today, you talked about having a clean clinic. I remember going to see a clinic in regional New South Wales, and there was a, the curtain had fallen off and the rail had fallen down. There was dumped furniture there. It was a complete bloody mess. And I said to the guy, "This looks like a second-hand furniture stock, not a clinical
Yeah,
setting." What else? I mean, I've always insisted on diplomas and degrees being put up there.
yeah.
What do you think is important in physically in a practice?
Physically in a practice, I think, well, we talked about the cleanliness. I think you need to have a practice that is, I guess, gives off. It's hard to explain it, but you need to give off the vibe of a place that's serious about helping people, and what that means is that people are there and you can see them working, and that kind of the place is buzzing. Like you don't want to be there. Like if it's I don't like walking into a place where there's just really light music playing in the background, and everyone's kind of half asleep, and the place is really, you can't raise your voice a little bit, and you have to be quiet, and it's good to have a nice vibe in the place. It's, for me anyway. I think it encourages people to kind of want to engage with you on a level that's just not therapeutic only. It's also it's a nice comfortable place to be. But have a clean clinic. Have a good reception. Have a smile on the face of the receptionist that's walking in, that you're walking in to see. Have things like FPOS and a get out of a written down. People are still using these appointment books that are pen and paper, or pencil and paper, and so you just got to look a bit professional. It doesn't cost a lot of money these days, and just tidy that up. And you can do that. We did that. I did that when I first started my paramedic clinic. We get a computer and put all that stuff in, and I got a little reception desk made, and I hired a young girl that was at university, and she sat behind the desk, and That was it. It's
People think that they could, and maybe they're right, that they can have this virtual reception.
hmm.
I cannot get my head around that. Whenever I come across it, I just hang up.
You can have a virtual receptionist, but it's not the best practice. Like you lose that personal touch. It's like texting versus ringing somebody. You could text somebody something, but if you ring them and you let them hear that there's a voice on the other end of the phone, they're more likely to engage with you. So you can have a virtual receptionist, but when you've got a receptionist that's greeting you nicely and smiling and looking after you, and if you're having a wait,
Knows
you
your
make
name.
give you a cup of coffee and knows your name, and has a chat to you about it, just takes the pressure off the practitioner to have to do all that stuff, and then you can focus on actually doing your job properly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, reception is expensive. Of course, this is probably one of the biggest
Hmm.
expenses we have, but I think it pays for itself over and over and over again.
Yeah,
You
it should
mentioned
pay for
also
itself.
bookkeeper. In your email today, you mentioned also bookkeeping. Now,
Hmm.
I know from my own devastating experience how terrible I am at doing the books and doing the pays and the wages and the transfers. Again, I think you've just got to pay for it because
Yeah.
the practitioner cannot do it properly.
Well, I mean, the practitioner, if they're running their own little show, I look, that's a tough one because, yeah, once you have the money, you need to get a bookkeeper. Now, once you're starting up, you need to know the numbers too. Like as a practitioner, if you decide to open up your own practice, it's not like you're just going to give all the books to a bookkeeper and you don't know what an income and expenditure is, and you don't know what a profit and loss statement looks like. If you don't know all that stuff, you need some financial literacy. And so I guess, and you can find all these courses online now. Like you go to a place like udemy.com and Coursera's and things like that. You do those little finance courses that teach you about, cash flow and profit and loss and income and expenditure. At least if you know that stuff and you can keep the books to a certain extent. I mean, when you're first starting out, you're probably going to see, 30, 40, 50 patients a week. It's not a lot of bookkeeping to do for the first few months. But if you're seeing, 30, 40, 50 patients, you should be making enough money to get yourself a receptionist and to hire a bookkeeper. And I guess you got to reverse engineer your prices too. You look at what your expenditure is, you look at what your rent is, you look at the things that are costing you money, and then you work out your prices that way. And you say, look, I've got to see 30 people a week to be able to cover my costs and make a decent living. Well, then you make your prices accordingly. If I want to see 40 people a week or 50, whatever it is, and that's how you do it. But yeah, a bookkeeper is something that comes along, but you need to know the numbers. It's important you know finances.
I've been told to put my prices up because it's embarrassing. I'm too low
Yeah.
for my position, which I don't believe. I think I charge a reasonable amount. Anyway, I hardly work anymore. I spoke to a young woman last week who's up in northern New South Wales and is about to graduate, and her husband, is a farmer, and they've got two kids, so she has to stay there. And she said, "But how am I going to improve?" And I said, "I think you just have to come to Sydney or go to places and visit, just hang out for a weekend or something like that." I mean, have you got any advice for people who feel isolated and as if they're just not progressing with their osteopathy?
Well, my first piece of advice, I mean, is they're very lucky because the world's a lot more connected these days. With the internet and the way things. I mean, we're having this conversation right now, and this is me learning off you. And I guess you could do this with a practitioner and have a chat to them every week. And so there's a few shortcuts, I guess, if you want to take them. And I guess if somebody's walked in your path before and you want to learn off them, you chase them up and you hunt them down and you say, hey, I'd like to learn off you. Even pay for their time. Like if you're working out regional, right, you're going to be making good money because you're going to be the only osteopath there. Pay for somebody's time to have a chat to them. For an hour. I mean, like you'll give your time away for free. And I guess it's. I mean, I'm not somebody to ask that of anyone, but I guess find somebody who's done what you've done before, or at least who has worked in the fashion that you want to try and emulate, and pay for their time to have a chat to them at least once a week. I've set up this Success in Practice course to kind of give people a good start and to bridge that gap between the university education and what they're actually going to come up to in real life practice. So that's a very good course to have a look at, that will kind of just teach you how to be an osteopath that can retain patients and rebook patients and get them better. So you can do something like that. And, there's mentorship there too on offer. But yeah, look, a lot of osteopaths are, especially ones that are vintage, I should say, they're happy to share their experience. I spoke to Alison Lynn not long ago. Alison will be somebody that anybody can have a chat to and call and say, hey, can I talk to you for 20
She can
minutes
talk
about
to
this?
the chair.
Yeah, and she's lovely. So you can talk to someone like her. You can talk to someone that's works a little bit differently, and that if that's the way you want to go. But you got to go looking for it. It's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter, but it's available now because we're so connected. So I empathise with her position, but she does have some things that are available to her that weren't available to us, I guess. And you got to make the best of a bad situation. So that's the advice I give. I don't know if you share that. I know
Yeah,
you
yeah.
say come to Sydney, but it doesn't have to come to Sydney. It's good. Like if they're having conferences and courses, I think the annual conference is in Sydney this year, so that's something that people can attend. But
I'm not sure you learn osteopathy at those conferences. You often learn.
no, you're better
You
off having these
don't,
one-on-one chats like we do.
yeah, I think so. Or just being there while you're treating,
Yeah,
and you never forget what something looks like. And
yeah.
I think it's really important to see these things.
That's the best way, is to be there. But I mean, short of having that access, to have a chat to somebody and say, "Hey, I saw somebody today with glaucoma. I saw somebody today with this pelvic issue. I saw somebody today. What do you think?" And you just bounce ideas off people, and you'll learn that way.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Sammy. Well, that was wonderful. You're a good egg.
I'm not going to let you go without asking you some questions.
Yeah,
You've just had a little hamstring injury.
little. That's why I'm.
You've evolved the ham. I know you're wobbling around there. You've evolved the hamstring off the ischial tuberosity. Was it the right or the left one?
Right, right.
The right one. Okay, and so you've had surgery a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago.
On the 7th, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
Very
so
interesting. It
there's some
was
sutures in there.
Oh, there's anchors and sutures, but there's a lot of bleeding when the hamstring gets pulled off. I just fell forward off a riverbank into the mud. I was looking at a bird, a darter, and
Yeah,
I fell forward, so really, really fell about a metre. So pulled it off, heard the popping noises, but there's a lot of bleeding into the fascia, and it follows the fascial lines down. So that's a lot of the pain I've still got now, because even though it's 3.5 weeks later, that blood is being resolved, and it's sitting. That's the worst thing.
right.
But the surgery was they say it's a rare injury, but I've got two friends that it happened to them, both in Sydney, inner city. Both happened to them that same week, so there might be something in the water. One of them's a sailor, and the other one was playing baseball. I was just bird watching, as I said, and everyone has a different thing, but I wonder if it's something to do with older women. But then he says he has just as many older male patients, so maybe it's just age. But some people have no pain. Everyone else has a lot of pain. Anyway, it's introduced me to a side of medicine that I really didn't need to know anything about, and it's forced me, basically. I won't be working for some time because
What's
I don't play golf. So if I can't play golf, I won't be able to do a lumbar roll, of course.
do you plan on getting it treated once the scarring heals up, and you need to get that fascia
I had
kind of
a treatment today
unwound?
with Sophie. I had a treatment. It's actually still all numb and edematous because they cut the cutaneous nerves when they dig in to pull the hamstrings back up again. But I had a treatment today from Sophie Hannum, who works with me, and that was good. It felt very different, and I'll have some acupuncture, real acupuncture, not dry needling, on Thursday. And then I'll have more osteopathy next week. I'll have that quite a lot because I want it. It's the edema I want to drain off. That's what.
Right. So tell us, okay, so you've got a hamstring patient, they're in front of you. You can't touch the hamstring at the moment too much. What are you going to do for the man? Like, what would you do what would Anne treat? What would Anne do?
Well, once again, it's wonderful to be in this situation because you feel how much of a whole body injury it is. It really goes from the sole of my feet, the strain, from the sole of my right foot all the way up. I can feel it in my abdomen, but I really feel it in my sternum. So I don't know what fascia there is there, but what big attachment there is in my sternum, but I really felt it there, that there's a big strain that's gone up there. And obviously it would go into the cranium and all that stuff. But I've had a lot of opiates over the last few weeks, so I'm a bit of a dullard. I've also, although I didn't get an MRI to have a look at the left side, but I know I've torn the left side too because, it just didn't snap and it wasn't agonising, so I didn't take any notice of it. But that's a big problem in all things. We get told that someone's got a break or something like that, and that's all we focus on. But that's just the bit that broke. Everything else got very badly twisted or torsioned or bent, whatever it may be. And it gets back that the safe path is you treat the whole bloody thing. Like you said, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. And that way you will catch everything. It's just like a fishing net, isn't it? You're going to catch everything that way. The osteopathic net, that's what we can call it. So it's been interesting to be so knocked about and to be so disabled, and how archaic it is. They want to put you on crutches. Now, if you fall from crutches, you fall 1.5 meters or 100, in my case, 172 centimetres. You'll just do the whole thing again. I got a frame off Facebook. Someone was throwing out a frame, and I can't fall off a frame. And after 3 days post-surgery, I was walking without the frame. But if I'd have had the crutches, I'd have fallen. Of course I'd have fallen. And as I say, it's ageist and it's sexist and it's ableist. If you're just a middle-aged woman who doesn't do sport, like me, unless you call golf sport, you really don't count that much. You really don't count that much. You don't fit into things, and it's not sexy. So, the rugger-bugger surgeon who does all the rugby players and football players and soccer players, they kind of dismiss you. And that's what my friends have found too. Even though one of them is a doctor, she says that she's been dismissed too.
Was that your experience with the surgeon that you?
Oh, well, he said to me, I saw a bloke yesterday, a surfer, and he had sciatic nerve involved. And I said, and how much pain was he in? He said, none. Oh, good on you, mate. Okay, well, what are you implying here? That I'm putting it on, I'd never.
So Sophie's treating you. She's moving your thoracic. She's moving your lumbars.
Yeah, no, she didn't do the lumbars today.
Right.
I don't want any. I don't want the anchor side on the ischial tube.
Right.
So we'll leave that for a little bit. And there's other ways to get around that thing, but. It was, there was a massive difference between the ASIS on the right compared to the left. So
that's important. You got to get that gait pattern. That leg swing. That leg swing has to come back.
So different. After the treatment. It was great. Yeah.
Well, the treatment, yes. Look, I guess the question, the $1 million question, Anne, is what evidence do you have that that's actually going to work? Hello, everyone. Just a quick break to give you some information on where to best find me. The first place is the private Facebook group called the Successful Practitioner Pathway. I've set up this private group as a place where practitioners can go and get tips and advice on how to best accelerate their practice and improve their clinical practice skills. The second place to find me is at successinpractice.net. That is where the Success in Practice signature program is housed. You can find more information about me and how I can best help you achieve success in your practice. So the two best places, the private Facebook group, the Successful Practitioner Pathway, and successinpractice.net. I will link to both those places in the show notes. So for more information, please see the show notes. Now, enjoy, and back to the show.
Well, I don't. That's my problem because, if most people in the world are Indian males and...
you said Chinese males last time.
No, I looked it up. There's more people in China.
Right.
Most of them are men for some reason. There's, several million, tens of million difference between the number of men and women, which is different to everywhere else in the world. So I wonder what they're doing to their little girl babies.
Look, you mentioned to me that the surgeon that you mentioned to me that did your hamstring, he's got a pretty good reputation. It doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't seem like. I've rehabbed some of his patients, and he doesn't seem like someone that's too interested in the evidence.
And he wouldn't be. And orthopaedic surgeons certainly are not. They're
You
certainly
know,
not, because they do what they do. And
yeah,
that's what we do. I mean, everybody is different, and no one knows that better than an orthopaedic surgeon. He is going to have to, or she is going to have to, treat each patient as we do, what's in front of him or her. And that's the only evidence that counts, isn't it?
yeah.
Because
Look,
some people
yeah,
have braces, some people have crutches, some people aren't allowed to touch the ground for 6 weeks. Well, come on. But you cannot live your life like that.
I spoke to Nick Lucas on the podcast a few weeks back, and we were talking about evidence based, evidence and so forth. And Nick's got obviously he's not an osteopath anymore, but his background is I guess precedes him. He mentioned to me that evidence based practice is really what's called average practice. They're taking the best average that they could find, and I guess what his thoughts are is that once you get a really good baseline of average, you can elevate the whole thing upwards. Now, I don't totally disagree with that, but I guess if you want average, if you just want what works on the entire population, you're going to be waiting around a long time before something works on you if you are a little bit different, And so I'm not too, I mean, evidence-based medicine is something I don't think it's going to go away. And I'm actually not too upset that because it makes our job so much more in demand, right? The more they go that way and the more we keep what we do alive, the more we are going to be in demand. It's not actually a bad thing. And I guess I don't think that the two can't exist together. I just think it's impacting education. That's the problem with it. It's not that it's a problem in practice as much, because once you get into practice, if you're a great surgeon, if you're a great GP, general practitioner, if you're a good physiotherapist, if you're a good chiropractor, if you're a good osteopath, you're not going to really focus too much on the evidence, because you're going to be doing things at the front lines. I guess you're the first soldier in battle. And the first soldier in battle doesn't know what's ahead of them. They've just got to play the game as they see it. And I guess that's what we're doing. And all the good practitioners will do that. And, evidence-based medicine is not going to really stifle that once you get to a certain level. Where it is wreaking havoc is in the education system. And it's not allowing, especially osteopaths, I can only speak for what I know, it's not allowing that that part of osteopathy to really be taught properly. And so I don't know why that is. I'd like to talk to the heads of the programs out at VU and RMIT and SCU and put that question to them.
It's not up to them. It's up to the Australian Osteopathy Council.
Right.
And
is that the accreditation council that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's called the Australian Osteopathy Council, which does the accreditation.
Right.
Yeah. But I remember asking an osteopath who's now not an osteopath anymore. He was poo-pooing what I was saying about osteopathy, and I forget the exact words, a long time ago. But I said to him, do you love your kids? And he said, of course I love my kids. He was annoyed with me, of course. And he said, why do you ask? And I said, well, how do you know you love your kids? Where's your evidence? You just feel that, don't you? You feel that you love your kids, just like our patients feel better. They don't, like I feel better after Sophie treated me today. There's no proof that I'm better. But at the core of our lives are things that have no evidence. They just have our feelings. That doesn't mean we're being loopy. It just means that we've got to acknowledge what our feelings are and give them value. When he talks about the average, well, that's fine, but we know that evidence takes 17 years to come into fruition?
15 to 20 years to kind of make its way out into the mainstream. And by that time, imagine how many people you've let down, how many people that you could have helped that you haven't helped.
Well, that's the average, isn't it? And luckily we're not at the average, because we're getting an immediate feedback from our patient in terms of mobility, on what we're palpating, in emotion testing, all of that stuff we're getting in. But you've got to remember, I read something today about how walking is the best way to solve recurrent low back pain. Now, who benefits from that? It's just like the Sydney University thing that said manipulation doesn't work. Having said that, the people they used to do the manipulating were second-year physio students who don't do manipulation, and the best thing for the pain is 2 Panadol. Well, always ask, cui bono, who's benefiting from this? And it's the government, it's Medicare, it's insurers. They're the ones that pay for and get the research that they want. And there's no two ways here, Sammy. Either we're all phonies and liars and deluded, or we're doing a good job. It's revolutionary stuff. It's radical stuff.
It is radical. No, it is radical. I get it. It's revolutionary, but it's not. It's going to, like I said, I use that analogy about the soldier. Like you're at the front lines. It's not. You're not going to have anything in front of you to show you that this works or this doesn't work.
No.
And all we have as weapons in that particular battle is our thought process, our philosophy, our principles. And they've done very, very well. They've done very well. They've stood the test of time. And it's not like we're idiots and we haven't thought about them. We're not stupid people that just kind of go and go, oh yeah, I believe in this. It's not a cult. It's medicine. It's a science. We've helped. There's millions of patients that have benefited from what osteopaths have done, and so you can't ignore that phenomenology. That's evidence, and so I guess especially in this marketplace, the free market, patients will always decide. They'll decide with their pockets, where they go and where they spend the money, and that's always, I guess, something that we could have on our side. You keep doing good work, you'll keep getting patients, they'll keep paying you to do it.
Well, in the last 6 weeks, I've had 4 people away. 2 of them overseas. One won a free ticket to see Taylor Swift in Paris. One overseas, 3 overseas, and 2 off. And then I did Miami, and the business has survived. It shouldn't have, but it did, and that's because I sent out a lot of emails saying, what's happened, but nevertheless, they kept coming, and we looked after them all. Not me so much because I was laying in bed, but they were all cared for. And when I sent out the emails, the kindness that came back to me from people I haven't seen for 35 years was just gorgeous. And you talk about your Lebanese community. Well, I don't know if all of us feel this, all osteopaths do, but I think having an osteopathic clinic creates a community too.
Yeah, no, it does, definitely.
It really does, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great community to have, and I guess helping people is what we do, and the principles that we've been kind of practicing by has allowed that to happen. It's through no individual talent. You just got to get out of its way. Sometimes you can get in your own way. I guess you got to get out of its way and let it do its thing. But yeah, no, building practices is just that. The concern for me is more to do with, it's getting harder to instill that in graduates because they've had 4.5 to 5 years of just not seeing it. Whereas we got to see it from day one. You asked me earlier, I said I was hooked from day one, and if you're not hooked, if you're just kind of, going through the motions and you're not into it, and they come to a clinic like yours, it's easier, but they go to another clinic that's, like I said, multidisciplinary and just has a whole diluted kind of effect of a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of this and a bit of that. What we don't want are people who are just doing a bit of massage, a bit of myofascial work. They can kind of get a couple of adjustments here and there, and then they'll stick them under on a couple of TheraBands and do some rehab. You'll help probably 30 or 40% of the patients, maybe half the patients that you see, but it's no way to. You're not going to get fulfillment out of it. It's not going to drive a passion inside you, and ultimately,
and as you said before, there's no point of difference. One of the things we do really well is we explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. And when you bring the patient into the treatment like that, it's the two of you working together, and that's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is a partnership, definitely. Treatment is a partnership between you and the patient, no doubt at all. Yeah, so anything you'd like to add tonight?
No, I'll have a think about it. I think the word you use is a privilege, and I see it with the younger ones at my work now. I think that they think it's a privilege. I do think they think their work is a privilege, and one has just come back from going home to her home state, and someone tried to sell her a practice because they've been out for 5 years and they're a bit over it. And she was thinking, no, she's not over it. She's loving it. But this is an
Yeah.
exercise-based practice where on the website everyone's like this to show how big their quads. No, not their quads, their biceps. So you know how they do
That
that.
looks like my website.
Stop it, big boys. Yeah.
It's funny because on a maybe a different track. It's really, you said that, but I always tend to find it's obviously there's a mix of patients, female and male. I think I don't know. I can't remember seeing data on this, but I think something like 60% of our patients, 60 to 70% are female. And I think there's some kind of not misunderstanding, but maybe some kind of thought out there that women require some kind of lighter approach to osteopathy, and
Oh,
I felt different. I think women really appreciate that when you put your hand on them, you put your hand on them, and they know that you know what you're doing. And so, I don't think that it's being kind of intimidating or anything like that. I think women really appreciate the fact that you're kind of taking charge of the treatment room, and you're telling them this is your problem, this is what you need to do, and I'm going to help you get it done. And so, yeah, there's no point kind of putting that back or holding back on that. But I just thought about that because that was something that was told to me a long time ago. They said, "Oh, look, Sammy, your
well,
clinic needs to be a bit laid back and more attractive to females." I'm like, 60% of my patients are females. I think I'm doing okay.
yeah. I think, well, you talk about laying a hand on females. My experience in regulation showed us very, very clearly that if women are being talked about in a salacious or sexual way or being touched in a sexual way, they know.
Oh, they
There's
know straight away.
no in betweens. There's no in betweens, and they'll lay there and they'll say nothing, but they will tell someone, and they may, if we're lucky, report it to the regulator. But being firm is what they want because no one's done that before, and it brings up another issue too. Is that once someone said to me, "I don't want to treat old people." Well, you can bugger off because old people need you, and you change lives very quickly with older people.
Yeah,
And their money is just as good as young people, actually. So,
they
and
have more of it.
far more interesting. They're not going to go and do it again at the F-24 or whatever that thing is, which we've got next door to us is an F-24, which is so weird. Is that what it's called?
What's that?
F-24? It's a gym, F-24 or something.
F45.
Oh, yeah.
F45. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, old people aren't going to go and do it again. I'm not going to go and stand on a riverbank again. Ever.
No,
My
that's
life.
it. You're done. Yeah, you're done.
Doing this.
Hopefully, you get back out on a golf course.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, no. The one of the things I wanted to kind of mention. You asked me earlier about building a practice early on. Your communication skills and the way that you kind of assert yourself, in that treatment room, becomes a lot easier when you have osteopathy on your side. Like when you understand your principles and you know that you're going to get an outcome. Like people get a little bit flustered because it's almost they're trying to think up of something to do to help somebody. But when you understand your principles and you're sure about that, and you know you're going to get an outcome, the communication becomes like you're having a conversation with your mate. It's a lot easier and more relaxed. And when you're more relaxed, the patients will pick up on that, and they're just happy to book in with you. And it all comes back down to your foundations. It all comes back to osteopathy.
And your heart, though, because there is a transfer of, for want of a better word, of love. There is a love transfer going on and respect, and so it's our principles. It's all of that stuff, but it's also giving honest love.
Yeah, you've got to be honest with that, and I think patients will pick up on that and what you're trying to achieve as well. Like you asked me earlier, what drives you? Does money a driver? And I said to your legacy was, and I mean, you could have like you could there's so many ways to make money. You can leverage your clinic because once you get to a certain level and you have some kind of authority, you can kind of leverage that into different ways that make money. But if those don't comply, like for me personally, if they don't comply with my osteopathic thought process, I don't do it. I mean, I could have a clinical Pilates studio in my clinic tomorrow and have it filled up, with patients that want to do, and you could have those on the subscription model, and they're paying you $60 a week to come in 3 times, and you'd be making $10,000 a week pretty quickly. But it doesn't fit with my model of practice. I just won't do it because it doesn't line up with what I think about and how I think about the body. And one day I'm not going to be able to do this anymore, and patients are going to look back and go, "Geez, he did his best he could for me, and he always gave me the best information and always did the right thing by me." I remember doing when I was a younger man, we did a fitness course, a boot camp and things like that. And, you're running around like a headless idiot every day trying to, cut your weight and get fit. And the best ways to do that is to lift weights and just eat well. And this guy that was training knew that, but he just had people running around because he had them on a subscription where they would pay every week. And eventually people would just turn away from it because they weren't getting the results long term. And so patients will always look back at you, and if you do the right things by them, 10, 20 years, 30 years on, one day you're going to either stop working or pass away, and someone's going to hear about it, and they'll remember that. They'll really remember that. There'll be a lot of legacy. And the people that you taught, the students that you taught, the people that you've, I know you don't like the word mentored, but the people that you've kind of helped along the way, they won't forget that either. And I guess it's just what you want. Like if you're after legacy, if you're just running a business for the sake of running a business and you want to do really well in that, you can. I don't make judgments either way, but that's the osteopathy. Like it's so you can't, once you face up to it, it's like a mirror looking back. You look in the mirror and you can't do certain things because it just doesn't sit right with you.
It's a form of laziness, isn't it? Because to tell lies is hard work. If you're going to lie to your patients, then you've got to remember what lies they are, and then you've got to say it again. And I'm very lazy, and so I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that. I just want a simple life, and that's where I get.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even about. I mean, what kind of ideal do you live up to? Like, you want to tell them, you want to give them your best. It's not even about. Some people say, don't lie or at least say nothing, and I guess that's just my personality type. I can't just say nothing. Somebody asks me a question in the clinic and I say, what do you think about this? I'll let them know exactly what I think. And then if it's displeasing to them, they might go away, but they always come back, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year down the track, and they'll say, you were right, this is what's worked out. And I guess you just got to be truthful and honest, and that always gets you where you want to get to, if that's where you want to get to.
Yeah. Well, as I say, we're all on the shoulders of giants, and I am, and you are, and I hope that the ones that you mentor, well, they will. They'll just remember you. I just know they will.
Well, that's a privilege too. It's not just the treating the patients. The privilege is also passing on all that stuff. It's you see other people go out there and they open their own practices and they do very well. And a lot of them, like I had a patient that I'd been seeing for a long time, and he saw one of my other associates that has since stopped working with me for many, many years, and it was just a bit more convenient for him to go out there and see this other associate that was now working in the city. And then he came back to see me, I think about 6 weeks ago, and he said to me, he goes, this guy, he's a chiropractor, and he goes, he's in the clinic, and he's got this clinic, and there's a gym associated with it, and all this exercise stuff, and he's the only one in that clinic that's just giving me a good treatment. Like, he's just moving my lumbars, he's moving my thoracics, and he's still doing that, and he's busy, and he's the best one there. And that, he's busy and he's doing really well, and it's nice to see other people building tall buildings,
Yeah. Good on you. All right. Well, thanks. All right.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up and look forward to the next episode. I think, we'll do this more regularly. I think we'll have this as a feature more regularly with you and me. I think we sit and have a good yarn, a good chat, and people hopefully get a bit out of it.
Well, there's a lot smarter people around than me, and we'll get them in too.
Yeah, we will. We'll look. There's a lot to talk about too. I mean, there's this new course over at Western Australia. There's some things happening in terms of regulation. There's some things happening in terms of changing landscape of practice in the contractor and employee model and all this kind of stuff with legislation and how to navigate all that. So there's a lot to talk about, and I guess we'll make sure we cover that in the next episodes.
All right, then.
Have a good night.
See you later.